The fog off the Atlantic didn't just roll into Cape Elizabeth, it consumed it. I steered my beat-up Honda Civic up the winding driveway of Cliffside Manor, the tires crunching loudly against the gravel. The house loomed ahead, a modern fortress of steel and floor-to-ceiling glass perched precariously on the edge of a jagged cliff. It was beautiful, architectural digest material, but it felt sterile. It looked less like a home and more like a cage designed to keep the world out, or keep something inside. I parked next to a sleek black Range Rover that probably cost more than my entire college education. My sister, Serafina Sterling, was already waiting at the door. Even in the biting Maine wind, she looked impeccable. Cashmere coat, hair pulled back in a tight, severe bun, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Elena! You made it!" Her voice was that familiar mix of honey and vinegar. I barely had time to grab my duffel bag before I was ushered inside. The interior was temperature-controlled to a perfect, soulless 68 degrees. Marcus, my brother-in-law, was pacing in the foyer. He was a man who usually projected the confident charisma of a rising politician, but today he looked pale. His eyes darted around the room, avoiding mine. "Flight leaves in 3 hours, Sarah," he muttered, checking his watch for the 10th time. "We need to go." "Relax, darling," Serafina soothed him, though her hand gripped his arm tightly. She turned to me. "Everything is on the list, Elena. Violet's schedule, her dietary restrictions, the emergency contacts. We'll be in Zurich for 10 days. 10 days of peace for us and 10 days of bonding for you two." She led me into the living room where the view of the ocean was breathtaking and terrifying. And there she was, Violet. My 9-year-old niece was sitting on a beige ottoman, staring out at the gray horizon. She didn't turn when we entered. She was small for her age, fragile-looking, with long, dark hair that fell like a curtain around her face. She hadn't spoken a word since she was 5. The doctors called it selective mutism. Serafina called it a difficult phase. "Say goodbye to Aunt Elena, Violet," Serafina said, her tone sharpening slightly. Violet didn't move. She didn't even blink. Serafina sighed, a performance of the exhausted, saintly mother. She walked over to the wet bar and pulled a bottle of wine from a climate-controlled fridge. It was a dark, rich red. "I left this for you," Serafina said, pressing the cold bottle into my hands. "It's a vintage Pinot Noir. Very expensive, very smooth. I know things have been hard for you lately, Elena. With the layoff and your therapy. I want you to relax while we're gone. Once Violet is asleep, pour yourself a glass. Take the edge off." "Thanks, Sarah," I said, feeling the weight of the bottle. "I appreciate it." "Just don't let her stay up past 8, Marcus blurted out, already opening the front door. "And don't let her wander near the cliffs. The storm is coming." He wasn't kidding. The sky was turning a bruised purple color. The weather reports had been screaming about a nor'easter for days, a historic blizzard that was supposed to bury New England under 2 feet of snow. Serafina kissed my cheek. Air kisses, barely making contact. "You're a lifesaver, Elena, really. I don't trust anyone else with her." And then they were gone. The heavy oak door clicked shut and the silence of the house descended instantly. It was a heavy, pressurized silence. I turned to look at Violet. She was finally looking at me. Her eyes were dark, intelligent, and unsettlingly intense. "So," I said, trying to keep my voice cheerful, "just us girls. Pizza and a movie?" Violet stared at me for a beat longer, then slid off the ottoman. She walked past me, her footsteps silent on the plush rug, and disappeared up the floating staircase toward her room. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. "Great start." By 6 p.m., the storm had hit. The wind wasn't just blowing, it was screaming, battering the glass walls of the living room. Snow was already piling up against the sliding doors, a wall of white erasing the world outside. The power flickered once, twice, then steadied. I checked my phone. No service. The Wi-Fi bars had vanished 10 minutes ago. We were effectively cut off. I checked on Violet. She was in her room, sitting on the floor, meticulously arranging a wooden dollhouse. I tried to engage her, but she ignored me completely. I felt that familiar itch of anxiety, the tight chest, the racing thoughts. My therapist would have told me to breathe, to ground myself. Serafina had told me to drink the wine. I went back downstairs. The house felt massive and hostile in the storm. I needed to calm down. I needed to stop thinking about my failed career, my empty bank account, and the feeling that I was the family failure babysitting the family tragedy. I found the bottle Serafina had left on the kitchen island. Vintage Pinot. I uncorked it. The pop echoed in the high-ceilinged kitchen. I found a crystal glass in the cabinet. I poured the wine. It was a deep, inky crimson. It swirled beautifully in the glass. My hand was shaking slightly as I lifted the glass. I just needed one sip to stop the noise in my head. I brought the rim to my lips. I could smell the bouquet, earthy, rich, and something else, something sweet underneath. Suddenly, a cold hand clamped around my wrist. I gasped and nearly dropped the glass. I spun around. Violet was standing there. I hadn't heard her come downstairs. She was in her nightgown, her bare feet pale against the dark hardwood floor. Her grip on my wrist was surprisingly strong, her knuckles white. "Violet?" I stammered, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Honey, you scared me. What's wrong?" She didn't let go. She pulled my hand down, forcing the glass away from my mouth. Her eyes were wide, filled with a terror that looked too old for a 9-year-old face. She looked at the wine, then up at me, and then she opened her mouth. The voice that came out was raspy, like a rusty gate swinging open after years of disuse. But the words were crystal clear. Perfect American English, devoid of any stutter. "Don't drink it, Annalena." I froze. My brain couldn't process what was happening. "Violet, you can speak." She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate the breakthrough. She just leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a frantic whisper, her eyes darting to the ceiling as if she expected the house itself to be listening. "Mommy put something in it," she whispered. "I watched her. It smells like almonds." She paused, her grip tightening on my arm until it hurt. "It smells just like the medicine Grandma took before she stopped breathing." The glass slipped from my numb fingers. It hit the floor, shattering into 1,000 diamonds. The red wine splashed across the pristine white cabinets like blood. Outside, the wind howled, burying us in the snow, but inside, the temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. I stared at my niece, and for the first time, I realized we weren't just trapped in a snowstorm. We were trapped in a crime scene, and I was the next target. The stain on the white oak floor looked like a gunshot wound. I stared down at the shattered crystal in the spreading pool of Pinot Noir. The smell of alcohol was sharp, pungent, rising to meet me. But under the notes of cherry and oak, there it was, faint, sweet, metallic. Almonds. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked at Violet. She was trembling, her arms wrapped around herself, but her eyes were dry. They were the eyes of a soldier who had been in the trenches for too long. "Violet," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Are you sure? About Grandma?" "Mommy gave her the tea," Violet said. Her voice was small, barely audible over the howling wind outside. "Grandma was crying. She said she wanted to change the will. Mommy said the tea would help her sleep. Grandma went to sleep and never woke up." I felt the room tilt. Nausea, sudden and violent, roiled in my stomach. Had I swallowed any? I ran my tongue over my lips. They tasted of wine. Just a drop, just the vapor. "We have to call the police," I said, my accountant brain trying to impose order on the chaos. "We need to leave." I reached for my phone on the counter. "No service," I muttered, remembering. I grabbed the landline mounted on the wall. Dead, no dial tone, just the empty hiss of the line. "She cut it," Violet said. She wasn't guessing, she stated it as a fact. Before they left. "I saw her in the utility room with the pliers." Panic, cold and sharp, finally pierced through my shock. I grabbed my car keys. "Get your coat, Violet, now. We're going." "We can't," she said, not moving. "The garage door won't open. Marcus changed the code, and the manual latch is padlocked." "How do you know all this?" I snapped, louder than I intended. Violet walked over to me and took my hand again. Her skin was ice cold. "Because I listen, Annalena. When you don't talk, people forget you're there. They say things, terrible things." She tugged on my hand. "Come on, I have to show you the basement." "The basement?" "Violet, we need to break a window and get to the car." "No," she hissed, her eyes wide. "If we go outside, he will see us." "He? Who is he?" "The man in the snow," she whispered. "The one Mommy pays." A chill that had nothing to do with the blizzard went down my spine. I let her lead me. We moved through the darkened house, the only light coming from the flashes of lightning that illuminated the churning white ocean outside. The door to the basement was hidden behind a panel in the hallway wainscoting. I had designed the renovation of this house 3 years ago, but I didn't remember this door. "Marcus had it built last year," Violet explained as we descended the concrete stairs. "Soundproof." The air down here was stagnant and dry. At the bottom of the stairs, Violet pushed open a heavy steel door. I gasped. It wasn't a storage room, it was a command center. Banks of servers hummed in the corner, lights blinking rhythmically, but it was the wall of monitors that stopped my breath. There were 12 screens: the kitchen, the living room, the hallway, the guest bedroom, my bedroom, even the bathrooms. I watched myself on the screen, delayed by a few seconds, walking through the door I had just walked through. The house wasn't a home, it was a panopticon, a cage made of glass and cameras. "Why?" I breathed. "Why would they do this?" "Control," Violet said. She walked over to a metal filing cabinet and pulled out a thick leather binder. She handed it to me. "And practice." I opened the binder. It was a script. Literally a script, typed out in standard screenplay format. Scene: Sunday brunch. Character: Violet action. Smile shyly at the senator. Do not make eye contact. If asked about your voice, look down and cry. Note: if she fails to cry, no dinner. I flipped the pages. There were hundreds of them. Scripts for interviews, for family gatherings, for doctor visits. It was a manual on how to act the part of the tragic, loving family with the disabled child. "She rehearses me," Violet said softly, "for hours, until I get it right. If I speak, she hurts me. If I don't cry on cue, she hurts me." I felt sick. The image of my glamorous sister, the philanthropist, the perfect mother, dissolved. In her place was a director of a horror movie, and Violet was her prop. Suddenly, a sound echoed from upstairs. Thump. It was heavy, deliberate, like a boot hitting the floorboards. I froze. Violet's hand flew to her mouth. We stared at the bank of monitors. On the screen labeled kitchen, the lights were off, but the infrared camera picked up the heat signature. The back door, the one leading to the patio, was open. Snow was swirling into the kitchen, and there was a figure standing by the island. He was tall, wearing a heavy parka and a balaclava. He was looking down at the shattered wine glass and the red stain on the floor. He crouched, touching the liquid with a gloved finger. Then he looked up. Straight at the camera. He knew we were watching. "The man in the snow," Violet whimpered. My architect's mind kicked into overdrive. The basement had only one exit, the stairs we came down. If he came down those stairs, we were trapped. "Is there another way out?" I hissed, grabbing Violet's shoulders. "Think, Violet. Is there a crawl space? A window?" "The dumbwaiter," she said, her eyes lighting up. "In the laundry chute. It goes to the second floor." "It's too small for me," I said, looking at the screens. The figure was moving out of the kitchen, heading toward the hallway, heading toward the basement door. "I fit," Violet said. "I can pull you up from the top." "There's a winch." "Go!" I pushed her toward the laundry room at the back of the office. We scrambled. The sound of heavy footsteps on the stairs above us began. Clump, 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 slow, methodical. He wasn't in a rush. He knew we had nowhere to go. I shoved Violet into the small dumbwaiter shaft. "Go to the master bedroom," I whispered. "Lock the door, find a weapon." "What about you?" "I'm going to turn off the lights," I said, grabbing a heavy metal fire extinguisher from the wall. "I'm going to make him blind." Violet disappeared up the shaft, the ropes creaking. I ran to the server rack and ripped the power cords out of the wall. The monitors died. The humming stopped. The basement plunged into absolute suffocating darkness. I backed into the corner, gripping the cold steel of the fire extinguisher, and listened. The door at the top of the stairs creaked open. "Elena?" a voice called out. It was a man's voice, deep and gravelly, distorted by the mask. "Don't make this hard. Serafina said you were depressed. Let's just make it look like an accident." He took the first step down. I held my breath, waiting for the devil to descend. The beam of the tactical flashlight cut through the darkness like a scalpel. I pressed myself into the corner of the basement, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I was sure he could hear it. The heavy steel of the fire extinguisher was slick with my sweat. Clump, clump. He reached the bottom of the stairs. The light swept over the server racks, the empty chair, the open door of the dumbwaiter shaft. "Clever girl," he muttered. The voice was deep, distorted by the fabric of his mask. "Sending the kid away. But there's nowhere to go, Elena. The doors are magnetic locks. Power's out. You're sealed in." He took a step toward the server rack. The beam of light swung away from me for a fraction of a second. "Now," I lunged. I didn't swing the canister. I pulled the pin and squeezed the handle. A jet of freezing white chemical powder blasted into his face. He roared, stumbling back, dropping the flashlight. The beam spun wildly across the floor. I didn't hesitate. I swung the base of the extinguisher with every ounce of terror and adrenaline I possessed. It connected with his shoulder with a sickening thud. He grunted and went down to one knee. I didn't wait to see if he got up. I scrambled past him, up the concrete stairs, my lungs burning. I hit the hallway floor running, sliding on the polished wood in my socks. "Violet!" I screamed, abandoning stealth. "In here!" A whisper from the ceiling. The attic trapdoor in the hallway ceiling was open. A small, pale face peered down. The rope ladder was dangling. I climbed, my limbs shaking. The moment I hauled myself onto the dusty floorboards, Violet pulled the ladder up and slammed the trapdoor shut. We collapsed in the darkness of the attic, gasping for air. The wind outside battered the roof shingles directly above our heads, a deafening roar that drowned out our breathing. "Did you kill him?" Violet asked. Her voice was steady, terrifyingly calm. "No," I said, wiping the chemical dust from my face. "I just bought us time. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe less." The attic was cold, freezing actually. We huddled together behind a stack of old steamer trunks. It was the only place in the house that wasn't glass, the only place Serafina hadn't renovated into a modern fishbowl. "He'll find us," Violet said. "He has a thermal scope. I saw it in his bag." "We need a weapon," I said. "A real one. Does Marcus keep a gun?" "In the safe. But we don't have the code." Violet shivered, pressing closer to me. "Aunt Elena, you have to know about why. We can talk later." "No," she insisted, grabbing my coat. "If he catches us, you need to know. You need to tell someone." And there, in the freezing dark, while a killer hunted us 2 floors down, Violet gave her testimony. It wasn't just greed. It was desperation. "Grandma found the papers," Violet whispered, "in Marcus's office. He was taking money from the campaign, millions. He lost it gambling on crypto futures. He was going to go to jail." I closed my eyes. Marcus, the Golden Boy senator, a fraud. Grandma told Mommy she was going to the FBI. She said she wouldn't let them ruin the family name with theft. Violet's voice broke. That night, Mommy made the tea. She used the almond extract from the pantry. A lot of it, but she put something else in it from a little blue bottle. "And you saw this?" "I was under the table," Violet said, "playing hide and seek. Mommy didn't know. Grandma drank it. She started choking. She looked at Mommy, begging for help. Mommy just watched. She sat there and watched until Grandma stopped moving." Tears were finally streaming down my face. My mother, my strong, principled mother, murdered by her own daughter for a Senate seat. "Then Mommy saw me," Violet continued. "She dragged me out. She shook me. She said, 'Your voice is a curse, Violet. If you say one word, the bad men will come and take Aunt Elena away. They'll kill her like Grandma. Do you want Aunt Elena to die?' She looked up at me in the gloom. 'I didn't want you to die, Aunt Elena, so I promised. I promised to never make a sound.' I pulled her into my arms, burying my face in her hair. 5 years. 5 years of silence to protect me. While I was in Ohio feeling sorry for myself, this child was carrying the weight of a murder." Creak. A floorboard groaned below us. In the second-floor hallway. He was recovering. He was searching. "We can't stay here," I whispered. "If he figures out we're in the attic, he'll just shoot through the floor." "The roof," Violet said. "What?" "The widow's walk. There's a hatch. We can climb down the trellis to the patio. The snow is deep. If we jump, it won't hurt." It was insanity. Going out into a blizzard on an icy roof. But staying inside was a death sentence. We moved to the far end of the attic. I pushed open the small hatch. The wind hit us like a physical blow, ice crystals stinging my skin. We crawled out onto the flat section of the roof, the widow's walk. The world was a white void. Visibility was zero. We crept to the edge. The trellis was an old iron structure coated in ice. "I'll go first," I yelled over the wind. "I'll catch you." I swung my legs over. My hands were numb, slipping on the icy metal. I descended foot by agonizing foot. The wind tried to tear me off the wall. Finally, I dropped the last 5 feet into a snowdrift. It was up to my waist. "Violet, jump!" I held out my arms. She leaped, a small, dark shape against the white. I caught her, and we tumbled into the snow. We scrambled toward the garage, hoping against hope that I could hotwire the Range Rover or smash the window. But as we rounded the corner of the house, a floodlight blinded us. The generator had kicked in. Standing by the garage, calm and collected, was the man, Cale. He wasn't limping. He held a pistol in his right hand, leveled at my chest. "I told you," he shouted over the wind. "Nowhere to go." He stepped forward, the snow crunching under his boots. "Turn around, Elena. On your knees. It's cleaner that way." I looked at Violet. She was staring at him, her eyes wide. Then her eyes shifted to something behind him, above him. The heavy accumulation of snow on the sloped roof of the garage, and the massive, razor-sharp icicles hanging from the eaves directly over his head. Violet looked at me. She pointed a mitten at the roof and opened her mouth. She didn't speak. She screamed. It wasn't a word. It was a high-pitched, piercing shriek, a sound of pure sonic force that she had been holding back for half a decade. The man flinched, startled by the sudden noise. He looked up. The vibration, or perhaps just the timing of the storm, was enough. A massive sheet of ice and snow, weighing hundreds of pounds, sheared off the slate roof. It crashed down on him like an avalanche. He didn't even have time to shout. The snow buried him instantly. I grabbed a snow shovel leaning against the wall and ran to the pile. Not to dig him out, to find his hand. I saw the black glove sticking out of the snow. I pried the gun from his fingers and threw it into the darkness. Then I dug into his pocket. I found it. The burner phone. It was cracked, but the screen lit up. New message, Serafina Sterling. "Is it done? Marcus is panicking. Make sure the kid sees it. Traumatized witnesses are more believable." I stared at the glowing screen, the blue light reflecting in Violet's eyes. "We have the proof," I said, my voice trembling. "We have to run," Violet said, pulling my arm, "before he wakes up." We ran toward the road, into the teeth of the storm, leaving the glass house and the buried monster behind us. The keys to the black SUV were in the pocket of Cale's parka, warm from his body heat. I didn't think about the man buried under the ice behind us. I just thought about the little girl shivering violently by my side. The engine roared to life, a guttural sound in the howling white void. The GPS on the dashboard glowed, showing a single blinking red dot, tracking enabled. I smashed the screen with the butt of the pistol I'd taken from Cale, shattering the glass and the tracker. "Where are we going?" Violet asked, buckling her seatbelt with trembling hands. "Not to the local police," I said, putting the car into gear. "Marcus plays poker with the sheriff every Tuesday. We need to go higher. We need noise." I drove blindly. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the blizzard. The roads of Cape Elizabeth were treacherous sheets of black ice, but I didn't slow down. I couldn't. We headed north toward Portland. I needed a safe harbor, and there was only one person I trusted who wouldn't call Serafina the moment he saw me: Jack. Jack was an investigative journalist for the Portland Press-Herald. He was also my ex-boyfriend. We hadn't spoken in 2 years, not since my breakdown that Serafina loved to talk about. But Jack was the only one who had ever asked me if I was okay, really okay, after my mother died. I parked the stolen SUV in an alleyway behind a dive bar on the outskirts of the city. I didn't want to risk his apartment. I used the burner phone to call him. He picked up on the third ring. "Who is this?" "Jack, it's Elena." Silence, then, "Elena?" "Jesus, everyone is looking for you. The police scanner is going crazy. They're saying you kidnapped your niece." "I didn't kidnap her, Jack. I saved her. I need you to meet me, now, and bring your recorder." We met at a Motel 6 off the highway. It was the kind of place where people went to disappear. The neon sign buzzed ominously, casting a sickly pink light into the room. When Jack walked in, he looked older, tired. He saw me, disheveled, wild-eyed, still clutching a stolen gun, and he stopped. Then he looked at Violet, who was sitting on the edge of the bed, eating a vending machine candy bar with intense focus. "She talks, Jack," I said before he could speak. Jack looked at Violet. "I thought—" "Tell him," I said gently. Violet looked up. Her voice was stronger now, fueled by the sugar and the survival instinct. "My father is stealing money," she said. "And my mother killed my grandmother." Jack didn't blink. He pulled out a digital recorder and set it on the nightstand. "Start from the beginning. Don't leave anything out." For the next hour, the only sounds in the room were the hum of the heater and Violet's voice. She laid it all out: the embezzlement scheme, the poisonous tea, the years of enforced silence, the hitman in the snow. When she finished, Jack sat back, running a hand through his hair. He looked pale. He struggled for the word. "This is nuclear. If we run this, it destroys a Senate campaign. It destroys a dynasty." "We have the burner phone," I said, placing Cale's cracked phone on the table. "Texts from Serafina ordering the hit." Jack picked it up, scrolling through the messages. "This is enough for the state police, maybe even the FBI. But we have to move fast. Marcus has friends everywhere. If they find us before we file this—" "They won't," I said. "We ditched the car. We're ghosts." But I was wrong. I hadn't accounted for the technology. I hadn't accounted for the fact that a modern luxury SUV doesn't just have a GPS on the dashboard, it has a transponder built into the chassis. Breaking the screen hadn't stopped the signal. The room suddenly flooded with red and blue light. The wail of sirens cut through the motel walls. I ran to the window and peered through the blinds. 4 police cruisers, and behind them, the familiar black Range Rover. "They found us," I whispered. My blood turned to ice. "Stay here," Jack said, standing up. "I'm the press. They can't just storm in." "Jack, no!" The door burst open before he could take a step. It wasn't the police who entered first. It was Serafina. She was wearing a thick fur coat, her face streaked with mascara, looking every inch the terrified, grieving mother. She didn't look at me. She looked straight at the officers behind her. "There she is!" Serafina screamed, pointing a manicured finger at me. "She has a gun. She's having an episode. Please don't let her hurt my baby." "Drop the weapon," a police officer shouted, leveling his service pistol at me. I realized with horror that I was still holding Cale's gun. I dropped it instantly. It clattered on the cheap linoleum. "It's not mine. She's lying. We have evidence." "Get on the ground," 2 officers tackled me. My face was pressed into the dirty carpet. I felt the cold bite of handcuffs snapping around my wrists. "No!" Violet screamed. She tried to run to me, but Serafina caught her. "Oh, thank God!" Serafina sobbed, clutching Violet so tight it looked painful. She buried her face in Violet's neck, but over her daughter's shoulder, her eyes met mine. They were dead cold. There was a flicker of a smile, a winner's smile. "It's okay, baby," Serafina cooed, loud enough for the cops to hear. "Aunt Elena is sick. She doesn't know what she's doing. We're going to get her help, the best doctors." "She tried to kill us," I yelled, struggling against the officer's knee in my back. "Jack, the phone! Show them the phone!" I looked over. Jack was pinned against the wall by another officer. The burner phone, the evidence, our only lifeline, was sitting on the table. Marcus walked into the room. He looked shaken, but he composed himself quickly. He walked over to the table, picked up the burner phone with a handkerchief, and slipped it into his pocket. "Evidence of the kidnapping," Marcus said solemnly to the police sergeant. "I'll make sure this gets to the district attorney personally." "No!" I screamed. "Check the texts. He's destroying it." "Get her out of here," the sergeant barked. "She's delusional." They hauled me up. As they dragged me out into the freezing night air, the cameras were already flashing. The press had arrived. "Crazed aunt kidnaps senator's daughter." I could see the headlines already. I looked back one last time. Serafina was leading Violet toward the Range Rover. Violet looked small, defeated, her head hanging low. She was going back to the cage, back to the silence. But just before they shoved me into the cruiser, I saw something. Jack was being released. He was pointing at his press badge, arguing with the cops. He caught my eye. He tapped his chest pocket, the pocket where he had put his digital recorder. And then I looked at Violet. As Serafina opened the car door, Violet turned. She didn't look at me. She looked at the crowd of onlookers and reporters gathering behind the police tape. She reached into her coat pocket. She was holding something, not a toy. Jack's spare smartphone. I remembered asking Jack to set up a secure cloud account earlier, just in case. I remembered Violet playing with the phone while Jack and I talked. Violet raised the phone. The screen was glowing. Liv. She wasn't defeated. She was broadcasting. The door slammed shut, cutting off my view. But as the police car pulled away, taking me to jail, a strange calm settled over me. Serafina thought she had won. She thought she had captured a pawn. She didn't realize she had just walked back into the castle with a queen. The sound of a jail cell door sliding shut is final. It's a mechanical, soul-crushing clank that echoes in your bones. For 3 days, I sat on a thin cot in the Cumberland County Jail, staring at a concrete wall painted the color of old oatmeal. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Violet's face as the car door slammed shut. I saw Serafina's triumphant reptilian smile. I had failed. I had played their game, and I had lost. I was waiting for the arraignment. Kidnapping, endangerment with a deadly weapon, assault. The charges were heavy enough to bury me for 20 years. On the morning of the 4th day, the guard came. Vance, lawyer. I didn't have a lawyer. I didn't have money for a lawyer. I expected a tired public defender with a stained tie and a plea deal I couldn't refuse. Instead, when I walked into the visitation room, Jack was there, and sitting next to him was Ellen Rostoff, the most feared civil rights attorney in New England. I sat down, my hands cuffed to the table. "Jack, how—" "You haven't seen the news, have you?" Jack asked. There was a strange energy about him, not defeat, vindication. He slid a tablet across the table. "Violet didn't just record her mother," Jack said. "She was live streaming on TikTok, a throwaway account I set up years ago for a burner project. It had 0 followers when she started." He tapped the screen. "It has 12 million views now." I stared at the video. It was shaky, filmed from waist height. Violet's perspective outside the motel, but the audio was crystal clear. "It's okay, baby. Elena is sick." Serafina's voice, sickeningly sweet. Then the camera angle shifted as Violet was shoved into the car. The phone fell, lens up, catching Serafina's face as she leaned in, thinking the tinted windows hid her from the world. The mask dropped. The sweetness vanished. "You stupid little brat," Serafina hissed, her face twisted in a snarl that looked demonic in the flashing police lights. "You should have stayed quiet. Now I have to drug you again. If you say one word to the police, I'll put you in the dark room until you forget your own name." The video ended. "The internet did the rest," Ellen Rostoff said, her voice cool and sharp. "The hashtag #SaveViolet is trending worldwide. The governor has already issued a statement. Child Protective Services removed Violet from the home an hour ago. She's safe, Elena. She's in emergency foster care, and she's talking to everyone." I put my head in my hands and wept. Not from fear, but from the sheer, overwhelming release of pressure. Violet had saved herself. The girl who hadn't spoken for 5 years had screamed the truth to the entire world. The fall of the House of Sterling wasn't a slow decline. It was a demolition. With the viral video as probable cause, the police obtained a warrant for Cliffside Manor. They didn't just find the cameras in the basement. They found the stockpile of sedatives. They found the forged medical records in the safe, right next to the campaign embezzlement ledgers. But the final nail in the coffin came from the ground. Based on Violet's testimony, the district attorney ordered the exhumation of my mother's body. It had been 4 years, but arsenic and cyanide, the ingredients in bitter almond extract, leave traces that last for decades in hair and bone. The toxicology report came back in 48 hours. Lethal levels. It wasn't heart failure. It was murder. Marcus Sterling cracked first. He was a man built for comfort, not for prison. Faced with being an accessory to homicide, he turned on his wife with breathtaking speed. He gave them everything. The plan to gaslight me, the hired hitman who survived the snow burial only to be arrested at the hospital, and the forged will. I was released 2 days later. All charges dropped. I wasn't there when they arrested Serafina. I didn't want to see her, but Jack told me about it. They caught her at the airport trying to board a private charter to the Caymans. She was wearing sunglasses and a scarf, trying to be invisible. When the handcuffs clicked, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just looked at the camera crews and asked if she could speak to her stylist. Narcissists don't break. They just run out of mirrors. 6 months later, the rain in Oregon is different than the rain in Maine. It's softer, gentler. It smells of pine needles and damp earth, not salt and freezing spray. I sat on the porch of the small A-frame cabin we had rented near Cannon Beach. The air was cool, but the fire inside was warm. The legal battle for custody had been surprisingly short, with Serafina facing life without parole and Marcus looking at 20 years. The courts granted me full guardianship. We sold everything. The inheritance, the money Serafina had killed for, was recovered. I put most of it into a trust for Violet's therapy and education. The rest I used to buy us a new life, far away from glass houses, far away from cliffs. The screen door creaked open. Violet walked out holding 2 mugs of hot chocolate. She looked different, taller. Her hair was cut into a bob, a style she picked herself. She wore jeans and a hoodie, looking like a normal 10-year-old. But she wasn't normal. We both knew that. She still had nightmares. Sometimes she would go silent for a day or two, retreating into that safe, quiet fortress in her mind. I never pushed her. I just waited. She sat down next to me on the swing. We watched the rain fall into the forest. "I finished the book," she said. Her voice was soft but steady. No raspiness left. "Yeah? What did you think?" "I liked the ending," she said, sipping her cocoa. "The dragon didn't have to fight anymore. He just flew away." "Flying away is good," I agreed. She leaned her head on my shoulder. We sat there for a long time, listening to the rhythm of the rain. It wasn't a heavy silence anymore. It wasn't a silence filled with secrets or threats. It was just peace. "Aunt Elena?" "Yeah, Vi." "Do you think they'll remember us?" she asked. "The people on the internet? The people in Maine?" I thought about the headlines. The Sterling scandal. The silent witness. I thought about the fame that had flared and died, as all internet fame does. "They'll remember the story," I said, "but they'll forget us. And that's exactly what we want." Violet nodded. She looked out at the trees, her dark eyes clear and bright. "I'm glad I talked," she whispered. I squeezed her hand, feeling the warmth of her palm against mine. "Me too, kiddo. Me too." Some scars never fade. Some winters last longer than others. But as I sat there with my brave, broken, beautiful niece, watching the gray clouds part just enough to let a single ray of golden sunlight touch the forest floor, I knew one thing for sure. The silence was over, and for the first time in a long time, the future sounded like music.